Welcome to the Lawless Astrology channel. I'm Dabney Lawless. I'm an evolutionary astrologer that trained with the renowned Stephen Forrest. And on this channel, we look at how the cosmos can support us here on planet Earth, and we can live a little bit more of a conscious, happier, freer life from all of our crazy patterns and monkey mind. So today I have back on again Christina Caudill from Radiant Astrology, and Christina is also an evolutionary astrologer. And we actually, we're gonna just have one conversation, but we just got so excited about digging into Kamala Harris's evolutionary astrology birth chart that I decided to break it up into two. So in this episode or video, we're going to be looking at more of her transits on election day, and then we might also pop over to the inauguration day chart. So welcome, Christina. Again, I'm going to put all the information about Christina below. She has a YouTube channel. She has a podcast on Spotify and iTunes. She is a brilliant evolutionary astrologer, and she does do readings. So all the information is going to be in the description, so you can contact her if you have questions. And I'm going to do my quick caveat before I bring you in, which is Christina and I both have a perspective. You may not agree with our perspective. I can own my own individual bias because I think we all have a bias. And I think if you don't have a bias at this point with this election, then you are not paying attention. So if my content is not the right fit for you, I completely understand. Please just pass this by, go on to another perspective, but know that the astrology is sound. We both have decades of experience as astrologers, and we are going to do our best to give you the real story, but know that we come from our own individual perspective. I'm going to bring you in. Hi, Christina. Nice to see you again. It's only been 5 minutes in our
Thanks for having me back. Super excited to get to the second part of looking at transits to Kamala's natal chart, which I think can really help for us to see, the type of energy that's activating her natal chart. Now, we can't see consciousness from the natal chart, so we never know how someone is going to respond to these transits to their chart. So on that level, we know better than to say that we know how, her life is going to unfold, but we can see what a lot of the potentials are. And especially these next several months, are like so incredibly life-changing for her. I mean, it's already been life-changing for her. So it's just fascinating to see, what are the planets that are in play and what can we expect over these next few months, because she does have some very powerful and interesting transits happening now and coming up.
Yeah, and one of the things we'll pepper in is also that the United States is having some crazy intense transits to the actual United States of America chart. So, countries have charts too. And so there's just so much going on collectively. So this is why this is such a juicy topic. And I'm willing to do multiple videos about this same kind of topic, because I think there's, different perspectives and different ways to dive into it. So I'm going to start screen sharing here. And do you see that, Christina? Okay, so this is Kamala Harris's chart with the transits of the 2024 election. So this is kind of that day. So, if we want to look at the day individually, what we're looking at is the outer ring. And then this is the chart that we just did a whole video about that you can check out about her natal chart and, who she is as a person and what the potential is there for her and what some of maybe her struggles are, but also the gifts that she brings into the world. And so now we're going to look at how the election, the planets in the sky on the day of the election actually are impacting her personal chart and what that might mean for the election itself.
Yes. The first thing that stands out to me, well, a couple of things. So Saturn is on her Chiron, within a couple of degrees. And I often see with Saturn to Chiron, especially in Pisces, because there's had quite a few clients that have been having this. As we said in our previous video, that Chiron can be sort of that wound, the wound that will never heal, but the one that we continually, make attempts to resolve. When Saturn comes there's an intense focus on that. It's like there's no escape, whatever that wound is, that can feel even more either acute, or it's just something that you can no longer be in denial about, even in Pisces, But oftentimes I've seen with Saturn coming there, that is a real opportunity, to help to define that wound. And once you can define what the problem is or what the wound is, then you have a lot more opportunity to find the healing for it, the appropriate healing, to do the work, because Saturn is often about doing the work that's necessary to heal that. And in the last video on her natal chart, we went deeply into that with that whole Chiron opposite, that stellium, Uranus, Pluto, and Venus. So y'all can go back and watch that chart or that video. But I do feel like there's this pressure and this potential karmic happening when it finally does, because it looks like, Saturn's retrograde. It will then eventually go direct, and in several months after that, go over the Chiron. At that point, we may actually see some movement in what we were talking about before, about women's issues in particular. That's something that she's really passionate about. But even prior to this, we can see she's had her second Saturn return, which is a time of redefining your life in later life, like on your own terms. And she's had Saturn to the midheaven, which is often about rising to the occasion for additional responsibilities, potentially in an authority capacity, it being on the midheaven in the 10th house. So she's definitely in a position where she's taking this seriously. She's taking on a whole new level of responsibility and personal authority.
When Saturn came to my 10th house, I had the hardest job I'd ever done, and it was not enjoyable. I'm not going to lie. It was so not enjoyable, but it was in a lot of ways a turning point and a pinnacle of my career. It turned it to the point where I could actually then go out on my own and have a very lucrative, successful business. But it's like I had to get through that really, really painful, difficult, uh, being out in the world, feeling very exposed and like, really hard, challenging. And so, I see this as a real challenge for her. And with Saturn on the Chiron, it's not going to be easy. It is going to be painful. It's going to be, she's going to be called to do the hard work of dealing with the pain from her past and things that have hurt her in the past. And that could be in Pisces, it could be escapism, projection, could be lies, it could be gossip. There's a lot of things that could be for her. We don't have her here with us. So again, here's a bit of my projection, right? So we don't know what that wounding was when she was a child, but issues from her past are going to come up and feel painful, and she's just going to be forced to deal with them. But it's going to lead to such a strong gift for her and moving forward.
If she were to be having Neptune transiting her, midheaven, or even her Saturn, I would be worried. I would say that wouldn't be a good sign for, say, winning the election. But that was way back in like probably 2011, I think, was when Neptune had ingressed Pisces. And so, we could go back and see what happened to her then. Maybe she had some kind of a disappointment in her professional life. I mean, generally, to me, with Saturn, Neptune in 10th house for her, this is probably going to be a dirty election with, like you said, a lot of lies thrown at her, distortions about who she is. I mean, they've already tried to distort, like, oh, she's pretending to be Black, but she's really Indian. Like, no, she's both. Come on. It's so easy to prove that,
She went to
But
Howard University and HBCU. Like, come on.
So she's probably going to have to find ways to buffer herself personally through this. But her having Saturn on the midheaven, to me, and she just went through her second Saturn return, I don't think she's going to be easily, wounded from this. I mean, obviously it's with Saturn on your Chiron, she will feel that, or that will attract that, but Saturn really wants to define things. Saturn wants to bring things to like a realistic end, even potentially. So I don't know. I almost feel like I feel a sense of strength with having that Saturn go through her 10th house. And then, that's not the obvious. Obviously, these things don't happen in a vacuum. The other big thing is Uranus on her Jupiter. And I think that that can be a positive. I see it as positive too. And this whole experience with her, suddenly having to be in the spotlight when for so long, she's almost been like she's been in the shadow, right? Like the VP rarely is expected of anything. But Uranus, which sort of can suddenly ignite things or suddenly trigger things or, shatter our known expectations. And it's on her natal Jupiter, which is a lot of where we can feel like we're living our potential, or where we can feel fortunate, or where we have that sense of expansiveness. That generally is, a really positive transit when you have a lot of energy around you that's, heading toward a positive direction.
Yep. And the only thing that's a little tricky is it's in the 12th house, but that's also the collective. And so that could also kind of, take it up a notch, where it's like, okay, this has to do with all of us, and like the recognition that we are all a part of one another. So I think that's something that's often missed during these kind of tribal culture wars between Republicans and Democrats, and like sort of a change where it's like, okay, we can, we can cross party lines. We can recognize that this is about, the collective good, especially in Taurus, which is a much more, mellow, chill sign. So.
Yeah, I see. The other thing with the 12th house is it's also the house of preparation. And having Jupiter there to me says, someone who is preparing for a long, long time. And, in Taurus, it can take a long time to get that Taurus, reward. And she's, within the last year or so had her Jupiter return. So I'm thinking it's like, always preparing, never knowing when it might pay off. And the Uranus is like collectively, because these are collective planets. I mean, if they were personal planets, I would be more, that tends to be more hidden. But because Jupiter's a social planet, the Uranus is an outer planet. To me, this is kind of like saying that she is like right there, part of the zeitgeist that is, rising at this time. Again, I don't know. I can't say anything is saying exactly win or lose from just transits from one day, but we're looking at the landscape of what's happening in her life and her, consciousness. And so, but as you had pointed out in the previous video, Jupiter, this is probably the best thing. Jupiter is, within orb of her ascendant and her north node. So there is something there that is like coming up to a real sort of karmic turning point.
I think that what is so exciting about this is that Jupiter, when you looked at, a lot of people have commented, and accurately so, that 45, I don't like to say his name, but the president before Biden, his chart has some really positive Jupiter in the 10th house. And so, there's a lot of really nice symbolism for him on that day as well. And it all kind of goes back to this Jupiter. And so here we have, again, kind of a rival marker where, Jupiter's coming up karmically to her north node to say, there's a big gift that I'm about to drop in your lap. And that gift is going to be complicated because we have to look at this whole other chart. But for her evolutionary path in this world, Jupiter is going to be dragging her into her future where her soul wants to go. Like Jupiter is basically here to say, come on, it's time. I'm ready for you to join me. And so that's really that's great news and great timing.
The ascendant is probably one of the most significant and sensitive points in the chart, as well as the North Node. She happens to have those conjoined. So, here Jupiter's retrograde, but I believe it'll be stationing direct not too long after this. And then once it goes over her ascendant, Jupiter in the first house is usually, you are an agent of Jupiter. You feel so sort of integrated with Jupiter's energy of generosity, of hope, of long-term sort of optimism, or having that view toward the long term. So whatever happens, that is something that she has to look forward to. But also the fact that the transiting nodes are in a very good position for her in terms of rising career-wise. Because whenever I see the North Node heading toward, now we know the transiting nodes transit, opposite to, inverse to how the planets transit. So the North Node there in Pisces is headed toward her midheaven within 18 months or something like that, or a little over a year. And at that point, that's usually the North Node to the midheaven is a very important time of alignment and realignment. If you're misaligned, things, need to change to get into alignment. But if you're heading toward, where this alignment is intending, then that can be a really sort of satisfying and even growth orientated direction toward your ambition. In a very public way, or your life purpose, if you want to, use that term.
Yep. So another thing that I'm going to bring in kind of the piece about the Uranus return for the United States chart. So we're kind of in the final, this is like the final pass of Pluto in Capricorn. So Pluto is going back into Capricorn in September, and then days after, it's in September, I believe. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I think it is. And then days after the election, I think November 20th, it then goes back into Aquarius. So it's really got this really short stint. And that's what's kind of tripping up a lot of astrologers, because I think if Pluto was in Aquarius this entire time, I think it'd be a shoo-in for Kamala Harris. But, from a mundane, the symbolism of a woman, power to the people, everything that we're seeing, a youthful movement. But during the actual election, we've got Capricorn, 29 degrees Pluto, and that is really within orb of the Pluto return. So that tells me it's not going to be easy peasy. And all you have to do is, if you read the news, you see they're already gearing up. There's some voter suppression. There's electors, there's people that are going to be certifying the election that are election deniers. I mean, there's going to be some things where this is not going to necessarily be okay, a normal election, right? This is something where we have to fight for our freedom. We have to fight for what we really care about and our values as a nation. And so there are a number of people in this country that have conflicting values. And so what's interesting to me is that this Pluto is in her 8th house of transformation and death and inheritance as well. So, in some ways it can go either way. Pluto in the 8th house can, you just become a whole new person. You become so much stronger. So I feel like with all of the transits that she's been having, she has become a much stronger individual, ready to take on this fight, because it's really the fight for the soul of our nation.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I felt the same way when I was thinking about Pluto going into Aquarius, and that being a part of the zeitgeist of the collective, shift from, plutocracy, patriarchy to more sort of power of the people, the good for all. And the election day takes place with Pluto and Capricorn again, which which I am hoping is more of a wrap up of all that we've been dealing with. When Pluto entered Capricorn in, I believe it was 2008, And, you know, we've had this really condensed experience of, you know, the elite with lots of power and lots of money. Basically, people with lots of money are the ones that control everything, right? And that also being, you know, we've been seeing it in such a clear way. And now seems to be a time where if we don't want that kind of a reality, then that means that people need to band together and recreate a new society in different ways, you know. Now, whether that's, you know, progressiveness, whether that's populism, you know, all of these do kind of align with that archetype. And, you know, we would really like to see with Pluto going into Aquarius something that is more focused on, you know, the people. Didn't you say before in the previous video that the Kamala Harris campaign had the power to the people, like that was their slogan or something?
That's one of the slogans, and people yes, she's talking about that in campaign ads. She's talking about that in campaign speeches. And then also, her song is Freedom by Beyonce from the Lemonade album, which is a great song. And that's a great album if you don't have it. So, you know, that in itself, like all of these things are so unbelievably on the nose, literal Aquarian, and like just, it's so Pluto and Aquarius. And when you're looking at mundane astrology, you can't ignore some of these things. That is the future, right? Freedom, future, power to the people. That's what's going to be happening. There will be a revolution of sorts. You know, that doesn't mean it has to be a bloody revolution. And it doesn't also mean that Pluto and Aquarius won't have its own shadow that is
Oh,
exposed.
absolutely. Yeah.
But I think it's not the shadow work that we've been doing is around, like what you said, the plutocracy, the oligarchy, the people pulling the levers, you know, in power around finances, around you know, Capricorn is government, it's the police. You know, these are all themes that we've been dealing with. And also with it being a Pluto return to our nation, looking at our own shadow, which has to do with racism and misogyny. And it's all been on display in a very stressful manner. And so I think there's going to be a much lighter energy when Pluto goes into Aquarius, but then we're going to be dealing with the next group of issues. But I think some of these other issues might begin to, you know, hopefully start to ease up a little bit.
Well, look also what we've got. So what's really important too, probably one of the most significant transits for Kamala is Pluto squaring her Sun and Mercury, right? So at this time, at the election time, you know, as you said, Pluto is backing up into Capricorn for the last and final Capricorn, you know, drudging up a lot of the Capricorn shadow. And you know, it's still within like a 2-degree orb of her sun. So Pluto square to the sun, if the sun is your conscious identity and the role that we tend to play that oftentimes has to do with even just our job, you know, and how we see our role in our job. Pluto square to the sun is having to really dig deep and change and transform even your conscious identity to this unconscious process that's calling for more, you know, because Pluto is that relentless force of change, you know. So she's probably just really even trying to find a way to be rebirthed, reborn, you know, that like phoenix rising from the ashes, in the way that she's always presented herself. Because, you know, to be a president or candidate for president, you know, it's not enough to just even be, you know, a really good senator or a really, you know, popular public figure. You have to be strong, you have to be popular, you have to be all these things. And she's really trying to find a way to empower herself. And a lot of times, you know, you have to just go beyond your limitations in terms of confidence, which is very much a sun issue. You know, it's like, how confident are you really? If you're not confident, people can smell it, you know, and if you want their votes, you got to find a way to have confidence in yourself so people can have confidence in you. And, you know, Pluto then will yet again square her Mercury which, that Mercury in Scorpio, is the truth teller, is someone who thinks deeply about, is not afraid, to tell deep truths, isn't afraid, to really think about these shadow experiences that are happening in the collective and to kind of go where others fear to tread, if you will.
Yeah.
Um,
One last piece that I just want to bring up. This is much more personal transits. Her moon and Venus are on her south node, and to meet just on this actual day when voting starts. Now there'll be, early voting has been going on, so I don't know that this is the actual, this is personal, like fast transits like this. I do think have somewhat of a role on election day, and this is kind of favorable for her in a way because it does sort of bring out her gifts, and it's a little bit of that, popularity contest, because the moon and Venus and Sagittarius, that's kind of some, real popularity. Some.
Women will probably show up for her, I would imagine, especially,
Yeah, right, because the moon and Venus both very much representative of women, and Sagittarius is expressing your opinion. And so I think that bodes well there. Is there anything else that stands out that you want to talk about for actually?
Yes.
Yes, okay,
Well,
go for
just
it.
in general, and let me see, it's because, she's got Pluto scoring her sun, Mars and Leo. Mars will just ingress Leo, right? And that's the risk taker, and it's opposing Pluto, so that's a fight. That is just, I feel like that this election is going to be a real fight. And also, the patriarchy is not going to go quietly dying into the night, right? They are going to fight with everything they have, tooth and nail, whether it's fight to the death, basically. And a lot of times, when something is dying, that's what Pluto can also show us. When one, like, type of life, or one phase in life is dying, it's going to really try to cling to it and really try to rally. um so I think that's just the general energy that we're going to be feeling at that time, is that this is like a real intense fight with people that have very strong opinions, strong beliefs, and are going to sort of go full force. So that, that's definitely something that's just sort of in the air during election time.
The thing that makes me happy though is that inauguration, Pluto will be back in Aquarius, which I think both.
Okay, let's take a look. I'm ready to take a look at that if you are.
Okay. Okay, so we have the inauguration chart up with on the outer ring and Kamala Harris on the inner ring. So let's take a look at what January 20th, 2025 looks like for Miss Harris, VP Harris, soon to be Madam President.
Well, I love that, the North Node has shifted into Pisces, which is her rising sign. It's interesting with, this Pisces stellium up here. Pisces, it's hard to predict with Pisces because, especially with Neptune can be either this, fantasy dream becoming a reality, or it can often be disappointment or something that brings the compassion forth through some kind of something sad and disappointing. I would like to think, because it's inauguration day, and Neptune conjunct the North Node, and Venus is in the mix too, although she's, with Saturn. I would like to think that one aspect of this could potentially be that, it's uplifting. The North Node is bringing that sense of uplift and that dream, that hope, to the collective with Neptune. And with Venus there, Venus is exalted in Pisces. She's very strong, being part of this stellium, and, being in between Saturn and Neptune. Saturn wants to solidify things, wants things to be a commitment, and Neptune is, again, the dream. So I would like to see the highest potential of that, being that, there's a dream that, that we're all feeling into. Um, and then, of course, the sun is conjunct Pluto. This is also MLK Day on Inauguration Day.
Very
Pluto
symbolic.
being, like you said, at 1 degree, still at in the very beginning of the sign, 0 and 1 degree, that Pluto is very strong, as it's just ingressing there, because it's kind of like, just entering into a new territory, and it's square her Mercury, so to me, I feel like it's lighting up her Mercury in a way, and taking on a serious commitment potentially. And not only do we have Pluto, entering, and by this time, Pluto is like in Aquarius for the long term, for like another 20 years, whereas the past year or so, it's been kind of going back and forth, trying to wrap up that Capricorn story.
Right,
But
right. There is kind of a moving forward because the nodes have changed signs and we'll have just gone past that node in Aries at 0 Aries, right? So that will be a kind of a collective reset for everyone, like where we're looking at the next chapter of all of our lives. And then we have, like you said, the Pluto Sun Cazimi, which is, yeah, it's pretty cool because that just is like very incredibly strong and powerful. But I'm also hearing what you're saying is Neptune has a way of sometimes being sort of disappointing. So this is where the honest astrologers come in, is that, we can't predict the future because we all have free will. And the people in Congress have free will, and the people in the Supreme Court have free will. And so we are all under collective energies that, can kind of encourage us to go one way or another. But
and what's a win for half of the country will be an incredible disappointment for the other half, however it goes, So that's why it's hard to say when you look at transit, when people say, is it good or bad? Well, for some people, it will be like a dream come true. For other people, it will be like so devastating and and disappointing, so it's hard to know. You can't say for an individual person, like, how are they going to take this transit? We do know that that element of Neptune is very much present for the collective because it's right there with the North Node. And it likely will feel like a big sea change. However it goes, it's going to feel like a major change and a major shift. And and we do want to watch the issue with Neptune and the North Node, when Neptune can be about distortions, right? And whether it's fake news or whatever, that could potentially also again be part. We've seen a lot of that already, of course, but that's the one thing that concerns me about Neptune with the North Node. Is how are people going to see this energy of, with some people it's going to be, we finally transcended. I thought that when Barack Obama was elected, especially for the second time, I was like, wow, this country really has changed, but then, we've since then, we've seen that there's shadow sides to progress.
amazing. Anything else that you'd like to talk about for Inauguration Day?
Again, it being MLK Day, I think is amazing and beautiful. And if Kamala does get inaugurated, that would be so incredibly poignant. That could also speak to all that Pisces as well, seeing the sense of serendipity and when things just sort of align cosmically. Yeah, I think that that's something to hope for.
I think so too. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And one of the things, like, I'm doing these videos because clearly I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris, and I want to get the word out. Like, I want to do my part for the campaign. But I also think that it's solid astrology. And I think people need to kind of realize that there are two sides. There's also 45's astrology in his interactions with this day. And so I think it's really about what we choose as a country, because I look back at what the United States is going through with Chiron returns and Pluto returns, and we're just really being challenged to decide who we want to be as a nation moving forward. And so I think everybody who is watching, it's our job to make that declaration, to really envision, Neptune in Pisces, Saturn in Pisces. We're asked to envision the future right now. And so let's put all of our energy into envisioning a future that we want our children to grow up in. So I don't want to get too preachy and get away from the astrology, but I just think that that's kind of the symbolism that we're all working with right now, is just kind of showing up and showing up for our country and understanding like what we want the country to be.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think we're probably the same generation, like Gen X,
Yeah.
right? I started hearing in, last maybe decade or so many people, my age and younger, just saying like, what's the point in voting? It doesn't matter anyway. My vote doesn't matter. I think we'll find more with Pluto in Aquarius, and whether it's through the form of voting, I don't know, but that each person has to do their bit. If you want to have, a different world, or whatever world you want to live in, or society or community, or even relationship, right? You have to show up and you have to bring your intention and do your part, however that shows up. I don't think that we can, because when so many people, all the people say, oh, it doesn't matter, then who gets it? It's the people, the plutocracies, people with the money, because nobody cares enough. And then they'll continue to sort of, plunder all of us, right? And I
Right.
think that is an awakening that we all need to be aware of. So again, maybe it'll take a different form than voting. Right now, I think voting is what we've got. We at least need to show up and do that, because other people are doing that, and they're dictating society. What's happening in society, the laws that control us. So it's educating ourselves, having a vision, first of all, of what kind of society we want to live in, and doing our part to try to make that a reality. And I think Pluto in Aquarius is the perfect, symbolism for, what's the best for everyone, and everyone having a voice.
Christina, it's been really fun talking about this with you, and we're all going to just show up and do our part. And yeah, there's a reason and a season for it all. And the universe is conspiring to help us. And we need to learn some hard truths and some hard lessons. But hopefully, we're finally waking up and getting the message, and everyone's going to get out there and vote. So thanks, Christina.
Right. Thank you, Dabney.
Bye, everyone.